Let me tell you something. When a narcissist hurts you, they don't walk away clean. No matter what they show you on the surface, inside something stirs. When a narcissist hurts you, you may be left reeling, confused, broken, and questioning everything. You wonder if they even care. Do they feel guilt? Do they reflect? Do they at any point realize the damage they caused? And while they may move like nothing happened, while they may even look you in the eye with no hint of remorse, know this, they feel something. But it's not what you think. It's not compassion. It's not clarity. It's not a moment of redemption. It's shame, it's fear, and it's a deep gnawing emptiness. But here's the twist. The narcissist can't afford to show those emotions, not because they don't exist, but because to acknowledge them would be to face themselves. And narcissists, true narcissists, aren't equipped to handle that kind of truth. They've spent their whole lives constructing a false self, an image made of ego, grandiosity, and control. They're not strong enough to sit in the discomfort of what they've done, so they bury it. But buried emotions don't disappear. They leak, and when that mask slips, even for a moment, there's a flicker. Maybe it's a flash of anger that comes too fast. Maybe it's their sudden silence when confronted. Maybe it's how they rewrite the story to make you the villain, because admitting your pain would mean admitting their fault. And that's unbearable to them. You see, a narcissist operates on illusion. They convince the world and themselves that they are always right, always justified, always the victim. But behind closed doors, in the quiet moments they try so hard to avoid, there's discomfort, not the healthy kind that leads to growth. No, this is the kind that leads to deeper denial. They remember what they did. They remember your tears, your voice shaking, the look in your eyes when you realized they weren't who they pretended to be. And while they may not cry about it, while they may not lose sleep the way you did, it leaves a mark. Not because they value you the way you deserve, but because they know on some hidden level they failed to keep the illusion intact. And that's what haunts them. Not your pain, but the exposure, the crack in their armor. When they hurt you, they don't feel powerful forever. That rush fades. The ego boost they get from control wears off, and then they're left with themselves. That's the part they'll never admit, that after the manipulation, after the gaslighting, after the discard, they feel a void, a strange kind of hollowness, a glimpse of how empty their victories truly are. But they won't tell you this. They'll never say, I feel ashamed, or I regret what I did. Instead, they'll put on a new mask, find a new audience, a new victim, maybe. Because to sit with that guilt, to process the truth, it would unravel everything they built. So they keep moving, keep performing, keep lying to themselves. But deep down, there's a disturbance, an unrest, a low-frequency hum that reminds them that all is not well, that their charm is a performance, that their control is temporary, that the emptiness still waits for them after the applause fades. You may never hear them say it. They may never send a text, never write a letter, never utter a word of accountability, but don't be fooled. Behind the arrogance, behind the cold indifference, behind the rehearsed justification, there's a storm. It's not the kind of storm that leads to redemption. Not yet, maybe not ever. But it's there, because what they secretly feel, what they'll never admit, is that somewhere inside they know they broke something beautiful. They know they mistreated someone who only wanted to understand them, to love them, to help them heal, and they threw that away. But they're too scared to face the truth, too fragile to admit they hurt someone who genuinely cared. So they keep up the act. And you, if you're not careful, you'll think they've won. You'll think they're fine, thriving even. But that's not real. That's survival. That's escape. Because if they stop, if they reflect, if they look too long at what they've done, they'll come face to face with a truth they've been avoiding their entire lives. That deep down, they feel the shame. They feel the fear. They feel the hollowness. And no amount of denial can protect them from the person they see in the mirror. When a narcissist hurts you, you might assume they feel no guilt. You might think they walk away clean, untouched by the damage they caused. But that's only half the story. The full truth is more complicated, more subtle, and far more dangerous. Narcissists do experience something resembling guilt, but it's buried so deep beneath layers of ego, pride, and self-deception that it never reaches the surface. They don't process guilt like most people. They don't face it, they hide from it. Why? Because guilt, real guilt, requires humility. It requires the strength to say, I was wrong, I caused harm, I take responsibility. And narcissists? They can't afford to say those words. Their entire identity is built on the illusion of superiority, on the belief that they are always right, always justified, always in control. To admit guilt would mean tearing down the very foundation they've spent years, sometimes a lifetime, constructing. So what happens instead? They bury it. But just because guilt is buried doesn't mean it's gone. It lingers, it festers, it shows up in strange ways. Anger, defensiveness, over-explaining, denial. You might notice how a narcissist will lash out when you confront them. Not because they don't know they hurt you, but because deep down your truth threatens the lie they tell themselves. Your pain is evidence of their flaw, and flaws to them are unacceptable. See, the narcissist isn't just avoiding guilt, they're at war with it. That inner conflict between the false image they project and the reality of their actions is unbearable. So instead of facing it, they project it. They flip the script. They make you the aggressor. They accuse you of being too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic. They turn the tables because in their mind, if they can make you look unstable, then they don't have to feel unstable themselves. It's a survival tactic. They are not processing remorse. They are defending the castle walls of their ego. They are shielding themselves from collapse. That's why when you bring up your hurt, they act like you've done something wrong, because in their world, any challenge to their perfection is a threat. And guilt is the biggest threat of all. This isn't about morality to them. This is about self-preservation. Guilt forces a reckoning. Guilt invites accountability. And narcissists are emotionally allergic to accountability. They've learned that power comes from control, not vulnerability. So they armor up. They wear denial like a shield and blame like a sword. And here's the twist. They often know they're doing it. Not always consciously, but somewhere in the background, there's an awareness. A quiet voice they keep trying to silence. That voice says, you went too far, you crossed the line, you hurt someone who cared, but instead of listening, they drown it out with noise, manipulation, distractions. They might even throw crumbs your way, a vague apology, a half-hearted excuse, a moment of charm, to keep you hooked, not because they're truly sorry, but because admitting guilt fully and sincerely would mean stepping into a reality they're not emotionally equipped to handle. It would mean vulnerability, and vulnerability to them feels like death. So they fake it, they mimic guilt, they imitate accountability just enough to calm the waters, then slip back into the old path. Because true guilt would mean they have to change, and change requires them to look inward, which is the one place they refuse to go. Understand this. It's not that they can't feel guilt, it's that they won't allow themselves to feel it in the way a healthy person does. The guilt exists, but it's distorted, twisted by ego, filtered through a lens of self-importance and fear. And you're left wondering if you imagined the whole thing. You're left questioning your worth, your sanity, your perception. That's what happens when guilt is buried. It doesn't just hurt them, it confuses you. Because their refusal to admit what they did forces you to carry the emotional weight they were supposed to hold. But here's the lesson. Their inability to admit guilt is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their damage. Their silence is not your closure. Their avoidance is not your burden. And their buried guilt is not your responsibility to unearth. Let them keep it buried. Let them keep running. You speak truth. You honor your experience. You learn the difference between someone who makes a mistake and owns it and someone who hides their guilt, because the truth would destroy the lie they've built. Because guilt that's buried, it poisons, it eats away at the soul. And while they pretend to be untouched, unaffected, unbothered, what they're really doing is living in fear of the day it all catches up. And one day it will, because guilt has a way of knocking even on the doors we try hardest to lock. After a narcissist hurts you, you may assume they move on without a second thought, cold, detached, unbothered. That's how it looks. But appearances are deceptive. Narcissists do look back. They do replay their actions, but not in the way a healthy person would. They don't revisit the past to understand the pain they caused. They don't examine it for growth or healing. No, they revisit it for control, for ego, for strategy. It's not remorse, it's calculation. They remember what they said, how they said it, how you reacted. And in their mind, it becomes data, information that helps them understand how to better manipulate the next situation, the next person, or even you if you're still within reach. They don't reflect to become better, they reflect to stay on top. You see, where most people feel guilt and allow it to guide them toward empathy, a narcissist experiences guilt as weakness, vulnerability, exposure. And instead of facing it, they flip the script. They replay events to reaffirm the lie they tell themselves, that they were justified, that you deserved it, that it wasn't that bad. They distort the memory until they can live with it, and sometimes until you start questioning your version of what happened. That's how it works. That's how they stay in control, by rewriting the narrative in their favor. They don't look back and say, I hurt someone who cared. They look back and say, I was pushed, or worse, they were too sensitive. They can even convince themselves that they were the ones betrayed, abandoned, misunderstood, because that's easier than facing the reality of their own cruelty. And that version of the story, that becomes their truth. This is where the danger lies. Because a narcissist who feels no need to change becomes more dangerous over time. They sharpen their tactics, they polish their mask, they learn how to appear more caring, more patient, more reasonable, when in reality it's all about refinement. It's about making sure that next time they win even more convincingly. That's how manipulation evolves, not from raw power, but from careful rehearsal. And yet, even in all that, there is something telling. The very fact that they do look back, replay, rewrite, proves that they are not untouched. It proves that something in them knows what they did. It may not be regret in the traditional sense, but it's awareness. That awareness is what fuels their need to twist the story, because truth, raw and unfiltered, is the one thing they can't tolerate. They may never tell you this, but they think about how you reacted, the moment your eyes changed, the shift in your tone, the way you pulled back even for a second. That memory doesn't leave them, but instead of letting it humble them, it hardens them. They tell themselves, I won't let anyone get that close again. I won't lose control like that again. And just like that, they become more guarded, more rehearsed. Not healed, just more dangerous. They convince themselves that empathy is a liability, that emotions are a weakness, and in that twisted logic, they create distance from anything that might resemble accountability. They protect their false self at all costs, and that means using the past not to grow, but to build walls, to sharpen their defenses. So while you're out here processing, grieving, healing, trying to understand what went wrong, they're studying, not because they miss you, not because they feel the depth of what was lost, but because they want to make sure they're never the one exposed again. They don't move on, they reload. And that's why closure is so hard to get from a narcissist, not because they're incapable of understanding what happened, but because they're too invested in keeping the story skewed in their favor. To give you closure would mean giving you power. And in their world, power is a currency they hoard. But you need to understand this. You don't need their admission. You don't need their apology, because the very fact that they look back, that they remember, that they quietly adjust their strategy is proof that your presence mattered, that your boundaries disrupted something, that your truth got through, even if only for a second. They will never admit it, but they remember the resistance. They remember the moment they couldn't control you anymore, and that shakes them more than they'll ever show. So no, they don't reflect with compassion. They don't analyze with remorse. They study the past the way a general studies war so they can win the next battle. But here's what they can't understand. You're not at war anymore. You're not playing the game. You're healing, you're learning, you're rising. And in the long run, that makes you more powerful than they'll ever be, because you're not hiding from the truth. You're walking through it. And that's the kind of strength no narcissist can fake, no matter how many times they rewrite the story. If you've ever been hurt by a narcissist, you know the kind of pain that doesn't just leave bruises on your heart, it leaves confusion in your mind. You sit there asking yourself, why do I feel so broken when they seem so fine? You go back and forth, trying to make sense of something that never did. You second guess your instincts, you question your worth, and the worst part, you start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, you're the problem. Let me tell you right now, you're not crazy. That doubt you feel, that uncertainty, that fog, those are symptoms of being emotionally manipulated by someone who doesn't deal in truth but in control. Narcissists are masters of illusion. They twist reality to serve themselves, and in the process, they make you doubt your own. They chip away at your self-trust, not always through direct insults, but through subtle digs, shifting blame and emotional contradictions. One minute you're everything to them, the next you're too much. One moment they say they love you, and the next they disappear. They rewrite history in real time, making you feel like you're remembering it all wrong. It's not just manipulation, it's mental warfare. And when you've lived in that kind of environment long enough, your nervous system becomes trained to expect chaos. You find yourself walking on eggshells, trying to avoid landmines that shouldn't be there in the first place. But let me make this clear. Your empathy is not a flaw, it's a gift, a strength, a superpower. See, narcissists are drawn to empathic people like a moth to flame. They feed off compassion. They are attracted to your softness, your desire to understand, your willingness to forgive. But here's the part they never expect. That very empathy they try to exploit is also what gives you the power to break free, to rebuild, to rise. They mistake your kindness for weakness, but they don't see the resilience that comes with it. They don't see that while you feel deeply, you also heal deeply. They don't understand that the same heart they tried to crush is also the one capable of rebirth. And the moment you begin to trust yourself again, really trust yourself, is the moment their power starts to crumble. Because narcissistic abuse thrives in silence. It grows in isolation. It feeds on your belief that you're the one who's broken. But when you name what happened, when you speak it out loud, when you start connecting the dots, they lose control over your story. And that's terrifying to them. You see, the narcissist doesn't just want to control what you feel. They want to control what you believe. They want to be the author of your reality. So when you begin to rewrite that narrative, when you say, no, this wasn't love, this was manipulation, this was emotional abuse, this was projection, you take the pen back, you reclaim authorship over your life. And let me tell you something. They may never validate your truth. They may never admit what they did. They may never say, yes, I hurt you. Yes, I played with your mind. Yes, I used your heart against you. But your healing doesn't depend on their confession. It never did. You don't need a narcissist validation to heal from a wound they caused. It's like asking the fire to apologize for burning you. What you need is the courage to stand in your truth, even when they try to rewrite it. What you need is the strength to believe your experience, even when they deny it to your face. What you need is to look in the mirror and say, I didn't deserve that. I'm not crazy. I'm not broken. I was just treated badly by someone who refuses to see themselves. And when you do that, something shifts. You stop waiting. You stop needing closure from the person who caused the wound. You stop handing them the keys to your peace. Because here's the truth. Their inability to love you properly doesn't mean you were unlovable. Their silence doesn't mean you weren't worthy of an apology. Their denial doesn't mean it didn't happen. It happened and it hurt, but you are still here, still standing, still rising. That's strength. Real strength isn't in pretending it didn't affect you. It's in acknowledging that it did and healing anyway. It's in feeling the weight of it all and still choosing to move forward with your head held high. It's in being kind even after the world tried to turn your heart hard. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That is power. So no, you're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not too sensitive. You're human, you're healing, and you're finding your voice again. The very voice they tried to silence. And that makes you unstoppable. There's something you need to understand about narcissists. The silence they leave behind after hurting you isn't peace. It isn't indifference. It's strategy. See, when they go quiet, it's not because they've forgotten you. It's not because they've moved on. That silence is calculated. It's the sound of a mind still working, still spinning, still watching from a distance, still trying to measure the impact they had on you. They are wondering if you're still thinking about them, still feeling broken, still questioning yourself. They want to know if their absence echoes louder than their presence. Because to a narcissist, it's not just about being loved. It's about being needed, being unforgettable, being missed in a way that haunts. That's their ego talking. A narcissist's self-worth isn't grounded in love or connection. It's grounded in attention, control, relevance. And when they hurt you, and you finally walk away, they don't feel remorse the way a healthy person does. They don't say, I ruined something valuable. No, instead they think, do I still have power? And if they sense that you're healing, if they feel the shift in your energy, the one that says, I'm moving on, I'm reclaiming myself, that's when their internal discomfort starts to rise. That discomfort, they'll never show it. They'll wear the mask. They'll keep posting, keep smiling, keep pretending life is better without you. But behind that mask, they're thinking, reflecting, not with empathy, but with ego, not with sorrow, but with fear that maybe, just maybe, you've finally seen through the illusion. That's the one thing they can't stand. See, narcissists live off perception. If you still think about them, still wonder, still hurt, that means they left a mark. That means their image still holds weight in your mind. But when you start to see them clearly, not as the fantasy, not as the charming act, but as the manipulator underneath, they feel that shift. and it terrifies them. They may not reach out, they may not say a word, but their silence is not indifference. It's them watching, waiting, hoping that their absence still has the power to control your emotions, hoping that maybe you'll blame yourself, that maybe you'll miss them so badly you'll come back, not because they want to love you better, but because your return would affirm their illusion. I didn't lose them. They couldn't live without me. It's not about love, it's about winning. And that's why your healing is so dangerous to a narcissist. Your silence, the kind that comes from peace, not pain, is louder than any words you could say. When you stop reacting, when you stop checking, when you stop letting them live rent-free in your mind, you break the invisible thread they tried to tie around your spirit. And make no mistake, they feel that break. They'll pretend not to. They'll post like they're thriving. They'll act like they've upgraded. But that's not strength, that's performance. Because deep down, narcissists are addicted to the attention of the people they've hurt. They need to believe they still matter to you, even after all the destruction. That's why they'll try to trigger you in small, indirect ways. A story, a text, a sudden reappearance. Not to make things right, but to see if they still matter. But listen to me now. You don't owe them your attention. You don't owe them your pain. You don't owe them your reaction. Because that silence you're sitting in, that quiet rebuilding of your soul, that's the storm after the war. That's you rising again. That's you choosing to move forward without needing them to look back. And that is power. Not screaming, not begging, not retaliating. Peace is power. Clarity is power. When a narcissist realizes that you're not seeking closure, that you're not begging for an explanation, that you're no longer looking for the apology they'll never give, that's when they feel the true weight of their actions. Not because they care about your pain, but because they lost the one thing they were trying so hard to keep: control. You don't need to go back and make them understand. You don't need to explain how deeply they hurt you. They know. And their silence? It's not a clean break, it's a cover-up. It's avoidance. Because if they looked too closely at what they did, if they ever stopped and truly felt it, it would destroy the image they're clinging to. But that's not your responsibility anymore. You've carried the weight long enough. You've played the scenes over and over. Now it's time to rewrite the script. Not for them, for you. Because your healing, that's the ending they never expected. And your peace, that's the part of the story they'll never get to control. So now you know. The silence wasn't peace. The charm was a mask. The apology never came because it was never meant to. And the love you thought you had, it was a transaction for control. But none of that defines you. What defines you is what you do now. You could stay stuck in the loop, wondering why they did it, waiting for closure, questioning your own memory, but that's not where your power lives. Your power lives in choosing yourself, in taking back every piece of your mind, your heart, your voice, because the truth is, they did feel something, just not what you deserved. They do reflect, but not to change. Only to preserve their illusion. They remember everything, but they will never admit it because accountability would shatter the false identity they hide behind. But that's not your burden anymore. You are no longer the character in their story. You're the author of your own. You are not the wound they left. You are the wisdom that rose from it. You are not the version of yourself they wanted you to believe. You are stronger, wiser, freer. So let them wear the mask. Let them keep pretending. You walk in truth now. You walk in clarity. You walk in healing. And the most powerful revenge is not revenge at all. It's peace. It's growth. It's becoming someone they no longer have access to. Because at the end of the day, narcissists may never admit what they did, but you will never forget what you overcame. And that's where the real victory lives.